Good morning. This is Tallie Consulting Services, the right-hand persons. It is Saturday, June 16, 2018. I'm really here to discuss my goal that I had for a seminar. Now, of course, I'm trying to have a goal for a documentary. It's called Crime Perspective Today, Making Amends, Telling Our Side of the Story. How did we get here? When I first started, I wanted to do a crime seminar. I've been teaching criminal thinking since 2006. I've been trained in criminal thinking. I've been in the substance abuse community. So let me explain the title, Crime Perspective Today. Mainly, what is my perspective on crime in Dallas, Texas? As it relates to the African American criminal culture. How do we get here? How do we get here over a lifespan? How do we get from point A to point B? Now, when I first started, I wanted to talk about women being involved in crime because my perspective is that we have a lot of women involved in crime. We have a lot of positivity going on with African American women, but we still have a lot of women involved in crime. We have an increase of women going to prison according to Texas Department of Criminal Justice. We have so it's not really about how many murders we have or anything of that nature, but how do we turn into a criminal culture? So in order for me to explain how African American women jumped off the porch, I needed to go back in time. So I got on the phase of the crack epidemic. But let me back up a minute. Let's look at the title, Crime Perspective Today, Making Amends, Telling Our Side of the Story. Now, if you've been involved in a 12 Steps program or you've been involved in substance abuse community, we need to make amends. When we're going through that process of letting go a drug-centered, crime-centered lifestyle and going to a crime-free, drug-free lifestyle, we need to make amends. Not only are we healing ourselves and letting go shame and becoming remorseful, but we taking ownership into our unwanted negative behaviors. We're recognizing that in the past that we have had character defects. Now, whether those character defects were brought on by drugs and alcohol, which is something that we are taught in our profession. You gain criminal thinking. Your thinking becomes distorted due to the pharmacological effects of the alcohol or drugs. So that's what making amends is all about. Now, I added telling our side of the story is because, if you ever been arrested or ever been falsely accused of something, sometimes people don't let you tell your side of the story. Now, what I've learned in life, it's always best before you make a decision on anything is to have the person tell their side of the story. Because, you can get caught up in gossip. You can make a bad decision that has a major impact on somebody's life. So, once again, Crime Perspective Today, making amends, telling our side of the story. How do we get here? How do we get here as it relates to the African American criminal culture in Dallas, Texas? Now, let's talk about the Iran-Contra affair. We're talking about the crack epidemic in Dallas, Texas. Now, we know all drugs in America was once legal. We had patent medicines, alcohol and water, cocaine and water, opiates and water. The Chinese settlers supposedly brought opium to America. The hypodermic needle was created in 1853. Cocoa leaves. They say they used to give cocoa leaves to the slaves. Okay? We heard about the German soldiers or soldiers taking amphetamines when they had war. So we're looking at all drugs in America were once legal. Now, in 1915, the Harrison Act was passed, and drugs became illegal. Now we know some drugs have medical effects. You know, cocaine is an anesthetic. And really heroin was created as an antidote to morphine addiction. Okay? Narcotics or heroin or morphine are really what we call cough suppressants. Cough suppressants. So, we say cannabis is a cure for all illnesses. So those are some of the medical effects. We have schedules. Schedule 1 through 5, if I'm not mistaken, 1 through 6. We know most definitely Schedule 1 drugs are illegal in America. I think marijuana is now Schedule 6 drugs. Meaning that it can be used in some states marijuana is legal and it can be used, most definitely used for medical purposes. But let's move on from that. Now, also, before I want to get into the Iran-Contra affair, I want to discuss the Italians and the Irish. They had some of the first mafia, or they, started some of the first criminal acts in America. When slavery was first created in the United States, England sent all their cast-offs to America. They was building, this country up. And then, of course, you had the war between America and British. The British was getting ready to free us. If I'm not mistaken, is it the War of 1812? I don't know. But George Washington, we didn't get free. So we talking about the Italians, and everybody was coming over here as immigrants. But in history, the Irish supposedly lynched several Italians, and so that sort of had an effect on race relations. Now we know the Italians sell. In the beginning, they sold heroin. Okay, now whether they got it from China, whether they got it from Afghanistan, or whether they got it from Mexico. I don't know how early Mexico was selling heroin. Mexico could have been just working for another country and bringing it into America. I don't know. But let's look at the Irish. The Irish main source of income was selling cocaine. The Irish are supposedly, as it relates to becoming illegal, when it became illegal, the Irish started transporting cocaine to America illegally. Okay, so that was the Irish main lick. They had supposedly two sources. They was going to Colombia and they was going to Jamaica. Now I don't know if Jamaicans were getting their cocaine from from Colombia, or Brazil, or Bolivia, or etc. Or the Colombians were just sending it to Jamaica. All those little Caribbean islands are what we call transshipment locations. Transshipment means, if you look on the CIA database, they'll tell you what transshipment is. Transshipment is meaning that like Colombia might ship cocaine to Cuba. So Cuba will be a transshipment for cocaine. Or they might send it to Jamaica. Okay? But we know Colombia is a producer of cocaine. Okay? So out of the Caribbean areas are mostly transshipment locations to get drugs into America, to Africa, to etc. But let me back up. So let's talk about the Iran-Contra affair. If there is an Iran-Contra affair. Now, when I was doing my research, I brought up the Jamaicans. You know, I used to go to the reggae clubs in Dallas in the early 90s. Zodiac's, Royal Wreck. You know, women, you know, the Jamaicans have groupies, just like athletes and singers and hip-hop artists. So in the conversation in my first interview, it was brought up that Jamaica and Iran might have a connection. And this is something I haven't discussed also. Okay, so when Jamaica supposedly came to Dallas to sell crack, even though they had, you know, some say they started out in New York, you know, went to Miami, went to Atlanta, went to Kansas City, etc. But they came to Dallas selling crack cocaine. Now let's look at the president. We got President Reagan, we got Oliver North, and we got the CIA director, William Casey. All are supposed to be Irish. All are supposed to be Irish, okay? So, in the Iran-Contra affair, supposedly, the CIA director was supposed to be assisting Nicaraguans in selling cocaine in America, and Freeway Ricky Ross was one of their main sources. And they would send the sales back to Nicaraguans, money, guns, etc., to assist them in taking out Pablo Escobar, the Colombians, whatever. But what am I thinking? I'm thinking they're all Irish. I'm thinking, hey, they were selling cocaine. They assisting the Irish mafia in selling cocaine. Plain and simple. And they taking out the competition. The competition is Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar got spots in Miami. He got spots in New York. He got spots in California. He got spots in Texas. He's employing blacks. They have connections with African Americans. They have connections with Mexico. I'm thinking they taking out the competition for the Irish mafia can succeed. No, crack is whack. You know who's even though it was a major change in America, in our communities, we had a lot of hurt and harm. But I'm thinking all three of them are Irish. I'm assisting the Irish mafia in selling cocaine, plain and simple. And I'm taking out the competition. So let's look at Oliver North. Let's go back to Dallas, Texas. You know, one of my consultants, told me, you know, when he got in prison in 1985, they selling crack cocaine. And that the black criminals really didn't have the arsenal to, go against him. We don't have machine guns. So, in snowfalls, they had the Nicaraguans bringing guns back to America, as that we are getting the guns from them. Okay, we're getting a Hispanic family involved. But if you look at El Chapo on Netflix, you know he's trying to rise. Mexico is already assisting Pablo Escobar in selling cocaine in America. El Chapo started out with cannabis. If you look at the documentary or the movie. And he's complaining about just selling cannabis. He want to rise, and he do rise, and he start bringing cocaine into America. So according to that, and really, to be honest, Mexico was probably involved. That's our border. In history they say that when we was in slavery in Texas, that we used to sneak across the border and go into Mexico. We had Mexico had a black president, and he ended slavery in Mexico. So that was possible. But let's go back to the Iran-Contra affair. Let's go back to Oliver North sending guns to Iran. All right, he sends, he's sending missiles to Iran. I don't know for sure if it was machine guns, but supposedly the Iranians and the Jamaicans have a connection, or it might be the Irish and Jamaicans. But the Jamaicans get their guns from, let's say they got their guns, and that's what the hypothesis is about. They got their guns from the Iranians, and they brought them to America. So really I'm thinking it might not be no Iran-Contra affair, because, like, once again, the Irish mafia is just trying to sell cocaine, and Ronald Reagan, Oliver North, and the CIA director is Irish. Even though they say Frank Sinatra assisted Pablo Escobar, according to Pablo Escobar's son, briefly, and Frank Sinatra is Italian. God is going to take over. He's going to do heroin sales. But in the documentary, it says that he wants to, he starts selling little cocaine. Okay, so, even though there's pictures of Ronald Reagan and Frank Sinatra on it, but I'm thinking, hey, Frank Sinatra is an entertainer. So that has nothing to do with it. But I'm thinking Ronald Reagan is and Oliver North and CIA director is doing their job. Is keeping the Irish on top, keeping the Irish on top of everything. All right, so let's look at Iran and Jamaican connection. I'm getting my guns. They say Oliver North, thought highly. Has a history of being, liking the Jews or whatever. I don't know. But Oliver North sent his guns via Israel to Iran, some machine guns. And supposedly Iran, this is my hypothesis, that Iran sent the guns to the Jamaicans. Now they say there's a Russian mobster that is in arms sales. He's supposed to be the top man in arms sales. Russia and Iran have a positive relationship. All right? So, the Jamaicans were sent to America to sell crack. And, they came with their machine guns. Excuse me. They came with those machine guns. And once again, the African-American criminals in Dallas, Texas, could not hang with those machine guns, So we sort of got a little slow start. Now, what's the other side also to this story? We're talking about the Fields family. We're talking about Pastor Alexander and a few more people that can make this a possibility. I want them. We got to pay big money to help us solve this hypothesis. The other side of the Iran-Contra affair. It's speculated that the Fields family may have a connection with Freeway Ricky Ross. Is that true? But we'll find out at a later date. But let's go back to, in our reality, what I'm saying, it might not even be an Iran-Contra affair. It's the Irish mafia, which includes Ronald Reagan, Oliver North, and the CIA director at that time, William Casey. It's a coincidence that all of them are Irish, and all of them have some. Now, I looked up Mr. Bush Sr., and it did not say it did not say he was Irish, so I'm leaving him out. Okay? Now, what am I trying to figure out? Now, we had 9/11. The Taliban. Afghanistan sell heroin. China sell heroin. We know Mexico is pushing heroin right now. I don't know if Mexico is a transshipment for heroin, but the CIA website say that no, Mexico is a producer of heroin. So when they get 9/11, what do Italians do? They build buildings. Was 9/11 really a strike on the Italians, on the Italian mafia? You know, we have all these theories why 9/11 happened. All I'm saying is everything we're going through with these lengthy sentences, that minorities and those that sell crack, is all about the mafia. But we hopefully we're gonna be able to solve this with SR Tallie Consulting Services, the right hand persons, tier 2 consultant and above. And why do I say tier 2? Because they always feel like African American criminals are not tier 2. Let's not forget Frank Lucas and the Country Boys that was bringing heroin on airplanes from China. You know, so we just can't say that the Bloods and Crips are tier 3 and 4. You know, the Bloods and Crips are in the beginning we really didn't have that organization. But we just can no longer say that African American criminals, gang affiliations or drug dealers are below tier 2. And I'm calling this tier 2 consulting and above. So SR Tallie Consulting Services, the right hand perspective, crime perspective today, making amends, telling our side of the story, and it's all about the African American criminal culture in Dallas, Texas. Thank you, and I love you. Let's have peace. And I love y'all. Bye.